I want our patients to have longer, healthier lives. I really want that. So if somebody has something that I believe with evidence will do that, I'll do it in a heartbeat.
Before I introduce this illustrious panel, I can't tell you how excited I am about tonight. It's so rare that you get three folks who are, pretty much influencers or very responsible for the decisions that get made to adopt digital health solutions in their environments, all together in one panel where we can all rage and ask them, how do we do this better? So I'm super, super excited, and I'm super excited that these folks are game and have the expertise to lend and share tonight. So a quick commercial for Evidation Health. We help companies generate evidence for digital health solutions. There, I'm done. I'm Christine Lemke. I'm the co-founder and president, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott and Karen and Minoja to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Scott Young. I'm from Kaiser Permanente. I'm a family practice physician, and I run the Care Management Institute at Kaiser Permanente. We're the crew that does all the guidelines, the evidence-based work, all the stuff that goes out to our frontline providers to tell them what the right thing to do is for our members and patients when they show up at our doorstep, either virtually or in person for care. We're also the host of our National Clinical Library, which is kind of that big data repository where we put all that electronic stuff.
Hi, I'm Karen Lee. I lead innovation and strategic partnerships at Humana within the Wellness and Prevention Division. So we look at digital health startup technologies, we look at consumer companies, and really anything that'll help to better engage patients and make healthcare more fun, and hopefully get them to adopt more healthy behaviors before they get sick or just to maintain their health throughout their life. And so we're at the more kind of cutting edge, oftentimes non-clinical solutions, but very much so kind of span the spectrum of care within Humana. So it's really nice to have you guys here today. Thank you.
There should be a green light if it's on. Scott, I think you might need to turn yours on.
It's because I'm a molecular biologist by trade, so the digital becomes hard. I'm Manoja Lekambasam. I'm from Dignity Health. I sit in strategic innovation. And just want to give you a little detail about what strategic innovation is for us. And we have 4 buckets. One of it is intellectual property management, so we look at internal innovation, which is what I'm responsible for. Then we have a strategic investment fund where we invest in companies that are of interest and strategically aligned to Dignity Health. Then we start up interesting companies that are looking at larger, broader issues, and so we become part of starting companies. And the fourth one I think that's really important is bringing in external companies into our organization. So Dignity Health has moved from being a holding company to an operating company. So what we are trying to do is to manage all of the external entities that are coming into Dignity Health through one function, and that's our function. And digital health is of importance to us, especially since now we have a digital health strategy and we're trying to put the pieces together so that we are effective treating our patients.
Great, thank you. So we had a really rich panel prep discussion where literally I filled like an entire wall of notes from talking with these folks. They're really keen to help each one of you navigate your way through their system. And so if I don't ask the hard questions or you don't get pragmatic things during the session, the first 30 minutes of the session, definitely tee up your specific questions during the last 15 minutes where we'll do a Q&A. So I'm going to start with a softball. What evidence builds trust in your organization? Everything from peer review, pilot results, RCTs, how do you guys measure, what works and what doesn't, and what to adopt and what not to adopt?
So for us, it's yes, all those things build trust in our system. I mean, evidence-based reviews help. Well done randomized trials are great, but more importantly, what we're noticing is those don't translate out into the real world. So seeing a product used under some stress or duress, seeing how it's received by caregivers, by members, by patients, by their families is really good. It has to be credible, it has to be accurate, it has to be something that we can reproduce and be generalizable. But yeah, I mean right now kind of the traditional idea of randomized controlled trials is falling away somewhat. Not the rigor or the discipline, but the methodologies.
I will echo that and say that we actually value all types of evidence, whether it's quantitative or even qualitative. I think, in this day and age, that softer feedback is really important because there are so many solutions that claim to do the same things. There are a lot of products that are very competitive, and so what we do look for besides those very basic, fundamental, rigorous quantitative studies is actually soft feedback, stories, hearing directly from users and customers, and just really getting a feel for that experience and whether or not it's effective.
So from our perspective, I think what's really important is how does it affect what we do, right? So we are in a lot of risk-based bundle payments, ACOs, we're doing all these value-based relationships. And when we try to introduce something into our system, the biggest question is, what is the value to us? What is the value proposition? And it could be economic, but really, does it improve our quality? Does it reduce the cost? Does it really help our physicians and our patients to do something better, easier, quicker? And so I think, unlike devices or therapeutics where you need to sort of look at clinical trials and FDA approvals and all of that, with digital, we don't really look, we want evidence, but I think the numbers in different scenarios is more important to us than really looking at, hey, I did a clinical trial with this many people in one setting. If you look at Dignity Health, we are in 21 states, but majority in Arizona, California, and Nevada, and we serve underserved populations. And so what works in Nevada might not necessarily work in California. So we're looking for evidence from different settings, different areas, not just in one homogeneous area. I think that becomes really important to us.
So that brings up a good question. So different zip codes have different requirements, et cetera. Startups are small. There's 3 people in a Rock Health desk over there. How do they do that? How do they navigate that?
So I think we want to work with our companies to do evidence and research. So we have this philosophy called run, run, jump. So we would get a company in when we do a first run in one area, right? We'll do a small, I hate to say pilot, but a test run. And then if it works out and our people are happy and there are outcomes, then we'll do it in a completely different area. In a different geographical area, different population, something that stresses that in a different way, in a different component of it. And then we'll do the jump, which is our scaling up, because we at least think we've seen it in different scenarios to be able to scale it up. Because otherwise what we find is we'll do it in one place and we try to scale and we can't do it. And that becomes a huge issue for us.
I'd say with that as well, this is, for us, we're, a pretty large organization. We're, 11 million members. We span all the way from here in California, which we're completely vertically integrated. All the way up to tertiary care to, Atlanta, Georgia, where it's highly networked. Our hospitals, our providers, many of our specialist providers are highly networked. For a solution to work for us, even some of the pretty bedrock solutions that we have, our population care work or our electronic health record, they have to be scaled and morphed and customized for each of those scenarios. Because you can imagine the difference between a vertically integrated system here in San Francisco or Sacramento or LA, where the physicians are all in the same group. Right? Or that's to a highly networked model where, this is somebody who may take care of 6 or 8 or 10 Kaiser Permanente patients per year. Where of the, super specialist, we have to have the same level of reliability, of quality, of outcomes from both of those scenarios. So our systems have to meet that test or have the ability to change to meet that test.
So Scott, you actually partnered with a Rock Health company called Mango Health and did a pilot and published some great results. So what's the next step for them?
Gosh, you want me to just the trade secrets right here?
No trade secrets, but a company like Mango who publishes results with Kaiser, what's the next step for them in terms of rolling out?
So this gets you right up to the point of what do you do for spread at this point? So let's take the example you brought up, and it works. And you say, what scenarios did that work under? We take that to our either our clinical staff or our regional staff or our regional partners and say, we'd like to spread this. What are the essential parts of that learning that we need to bring to each of our regions, each of our 7, now 8 regions, to deploy that out? And so our spread strategy is more art than science, but it takes a conversation with that company to do that. I mean, they have to be in the room when we're talking about how you do that. With Omada is another example, another great example. Highly successful for us. We like Omada. We get a lot of great benefit from Omada. And again, that's another one that's been published. So how do I spread that from Georgia? Highly successful. We have like 75%, either overweight or obese in obesity levels in Georgia. So that's an area where it was difficult to not see some effect. Right? I mean, seriously, when you got that big of a penetration, so how do you bring that into California or to the Northwest or some of those regions? That takes a different conversation, and both sides being willing to give a little.
Could companies navigate that a little bit better? So companies love to shortcut things. Is there something that those companies could do to shortcut that process?
Yeah, I think the first question we had today is, you start with the evidence. You start with, does it work? And does it work for who and under what scenario? And then kind of go from there, right? That's where you build up from at that point. So we'll make determinations on the areas that we're not willing to give on. Safety, quality, outcomes, affordability issues. There's kind of this floor that we're not going to give an inch on. And after that, kind of deployment strategies are areas where there is room for both sides to talk. I think being clear in your mind of what those are and whatever your product is going in is important. When we say, what component of your product is going to affect outcomes, and somebody can't give you that answer, that's a problem. At that point, you don't know your product well enough in the field to be able to have a conversation with us, and there's a lot of people in line.
So Karen.
I have some comments about this, but echoing some of the thoughts and feelings here, I think the first takeaway is understand your product and what your target audience is, because when you come to a very national payer or provider, you've got a lot of different populations. So if you know who you're targeting, then you can work with your partner to decide who should be in your pilot or who should be in your study. And if your pilot and your early design is a bit more targeted, that makes it more likely that then your product can be scaled out to that target channel, whatever that is. And so if it's Medicare, it's Medicare. If it's commercial, very different than Medicare. And so thinking through that strategy early on before you come to a payer provider and kind of deciding who is my target market that I want to appeal to and solve the problems for, and then working together to deploy a pilot, even in the very early stages, I think is so crucial. And then beyond that, evidence is very important. It's the foundation of everything, but realize that these are large, political, complex organizations with current programs that are being deployed. So even if we recognize that a new technology or a pilot is going really well, you have to kind of start planning out the longer term of how you shift programs, current programs, to a new program, or which members you want to offer this to. It's a very long process. And so I think just understanding that beyond the evidence and beyond a successful pilot and research, there's going to be some complexities that you have to be patient in working through, and hopefully you have sponsors and people that really care and want to help push forward. But things like mergers and acquisitions happen, just speaking for Humana and Aetna. So being patient through those processes and understanding where you can kind of move forward and where maybe things would be stalled and are more difficult to move forward, I think is important coming from our perspective.
So at Dignity, you talked about lots of kings and queens. What did you mean by that?
So I think, it's not a... When you look at the research, right, it says that healthcare is the place where technology has the least effect, right? We have great technology, we have great tools, it comes into healthcare, and I sometimes say innovation comes to die in healthcare sometimes because you're trying to go against the current, because you're talking to people who are trained a certain way, who do things a certain way, who has control over what they're doing. And even if you're part of a large system, the physician is the king or the queen of their domain, right? And to make changes, you need to go affect change in all these micro environments and microcosms. So it's a really uphill task. That's why when you come into a large system and you say, I did this pilot and I'm really successful, the next step is enterprise-wide contract. It doesn't happen that way. When you're looking, it's, a startup, digital health is a fast-moving environment. Healthcare is a very slow, bureaucratic environment because we have personal health information, we have privacy issues, we have compliance issues, we have regulation, we have stock, anti-kickback, you name it. The legal department is really busy doing all that. It takes them a while to get to the contracts to do innovation and to do startups and to do pilots. So I think understanding who you're dealing with, knowing that you do have stresses, but this is the provider, this is what you're facing, is very important, I think, when you work with the provider. We don't mean to be slow to mess with you, we're just slow. That's how
Well, that's good to know. Monisha, who has done this well at your organization? Like, what companies have you partnered with that have navigated this sort of intimidating gauntlet really well?
So 2 examples that we have right now is Propeller Health and Augmetics. I mean, those are the 2 that we can see going through, but it hasn't been quick for them either. I mean, it's been a long partnership. Propeller did a pilot in California, and they showed that, does everyone know what Propeller is? Okay, so it's a GPS guided asthma system, and I think we showed 50% decrease in ED visits, which is really important when you're looking at asthma population, right? So it was really successful in that market area, and then we wanted to do it in another area, but everyone's like, we don't have the funding. Because if you have to remember that the budgets are set a year in advance, and so everything that we have in our capital and our operating budget is allocated already for what we're going to do. So if the service area has to come up with the money to do whatever this pilot or this test is, they're going to say, wait till the next fiscal year and show me your outcomes while you're doing that so that I can justify my budgets, right? So it takes a while to do it. But now that it's seen and there's some evidence, we're trying to convince other people to get in and do it. And the same with Augmetics. You can reduce 1 to 3 hours of physician time, which can translate to 1 to 4 patients per day. Or less time with the EMR, which is hugely important. So physician satisfaction really goes up with it. But then you have to go and talk to the medical groups and the physician practices and all of these people with this evidence on a sort of a one-by-one basis and convince them to do it. So they are successful and the evidence is there. It's just trying to get it going. And so if we have help from the companies, it's actually helpful as well.
So quick draw question, don't spend more than just a second on this. When's your budgeting cycle, budget planning cycle? What month?
Oh my gosh.
Our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th, and our budgeting starts in January.
Karen?
It's completely irrelevant. So it doesn't. Don't think too hard about this stuff because I'm a huge champion of just being flexible because things change all the time. And just because something's budgeted does not mean it'll be there when you come to us thinking that it's there. So don't worry about budget cycles. Just come to us when you have a real good product or idea that's got early results. You're ready to work with a big channel national partner and just, be nimble and be strategic with us. So don't worry about budget cycles. I think for some organizations.
Remember, she's a pair. Yeah.
And that's why we have different perspectives up here, right? Because there's differences between providers and payers, and I've worked at both. So I think having that knowledge and also knowing organization by organization, it's very different. But just work with the partner that you have there. And I think one thing that actually doesn't help is going to multiple people, for example, at Humana and trying to get in different angles because that's not necessarily going to help your case. I think if you find a person who's genuinely trying to help you through that process and explaining the differences in budget cycles or politics or something to you, they're likely trying to be helpful and not hurtful because all of our success is dependent upon our partnerships with you. So realize that we're kind of the middleman and we're your champion.
Scott, same?
So, calendar year is the budget cycle, and we have, now just about to be 8 regions, and they all start their budgeting cycle at different times, so it really kind of doesn't matter in there. I will tell you that these last 2 points around find somebody who's going to advise you on how to get into the company, on how to get into the organization, and follow that advice. They're like telling you this for a reason. We've had numerous examples of people just kind of running through a Rolodex. And we talk to each other. I mean, we know you're calling. We figured it out. It was it's like you're probably not going to get a call back at that point when somebody. So it's like somebody tells you, we have a new product council. We do. We have that. It's pretty high bar to get through. You have to get through the New Product Council. It's representatives from engineering, from pharmacy, from the physicians group, from hospitals who really take new capabilities products and we shake it down. If you don't make it through, you don't make it through. It's done. I mean, that's kind of it. If you do, it's, the golden ticket. If somebody says, you got to go through that door, don't try and go around that door because, they'll know. And this issue around the conservatism of medicine is true. And, I mean, I'm a doctor. If it goes bad with me and this patient. And it goes bad for that patient. And we have had, I can have gone through numerous, I can give you all these examples of the Wonder drug or the Wonder app, and I'm like, oh, that's not going to go to my patient first. Oh, no. Oh, no. That mistake is going to happen somewhere else because I've been burned personally, or my patients have been burned, or I've seen colleagues burned. And so, the closer you get to the bedside or the operating room or the ER, the slower it moves because the stakes get exponentially higher. And it's so...
So things like weight loss might be on one side of the spectrum.
Right.
Things like, that might change your decisions of treatment closer to the bedside might have a whole other level of evidence they need.
Yeah, using new capabilities in open heart surgery versus weight loss. I got to tell you, they are at different parts of the spectrum. The mistakes become very proximal to the event on that. And so, so understanding that when people are talking to you and you think, that person is really putting the anchor out, going, they're probably not doing that intentionally. I want my life to be easier. I want our patients to have longer, healthier lives. I really want that. So if somebody has something that I believe with evidence will do that, I'll do it in a heartbeat. If I have any doubt, or a thought that's like, this one's a 50-50 shot, you can just put yourself in there going, I'm not going to subject somebody to that without knowing.
So Scott artfully pivoted us from how to sell to these folks back to evidence again, so thank you for that.
That's
Karen.
what I do.
Karen, we talked on the phone a little bit about trends in evidence generation for a lot of companies. You talked about very specific metrics for very specific types of companies. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So it's very interesting. In the less clinical space, so when you're looking at wellness and prevention, even though you're not as close to the point of care at a hospital or outpatient center, there's actually more competition. Because weight loss, for example, there's tons of companies and consumer brands doing weight loss. Now there's digital health companies doing DPP, diabetes prevention programs, and diabetes management programs. And so the spaces between healthcare and consumer programs are kind of merging. And so there's a lot more competition than you think, and there's a lot of consumer companies out there, 50 plus years of experience trying to launch into healthcare, and then there's new digital health startups tackling weight loss, nutrition, et cetera, trying to actually come to healthcare, but bringing more of a consumer, mobile, user-friendly lens. So it's actually, I feel that we're looking at many, many companies. It's such a high volume of companies that we're looking at regularly. And the one point of frustration, I think, is that even in any given space where there are studies or clinical guidelines or standards, weight loss is a really good example. So the metric you all should be looking at if you're doing weight loss is the percentage of participants losing 5% or more body weight in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And it surprises us how many companies come to us and don't present their evidence in that manner. They might have evidence, but we have to dig. We have to say, can you give us that raw data or calculate it this way or show it this way? Because what we're actually trying to do is assess you against your competitors. And if you're not looking at evidence the same way, you're not presenting in a clinically significant manner, that makes it tough for us. And ultimately, will pass because there's companies presenting their evidence in a better way. So I'd say do your research, really understand your area, and when you come to providers and payers, speak on that level, and I think that'll get you very far.
I think that's a really good point about doing your research with who your end user is, right? So, if you think, I have had people say this is an amazing technology, it does things really fast, and it's incredible technology-wise, but then a physician or a clinical care provider will look at it and say, it doesn't serve the purpose I have. It's a great technology, but it I have to spend time on it. It's too cumbersome. It's not in my workflow. It doesn't meet the metrics that I have today. And so I think having that discussion and conversation with that end user and understanding what the goal is for them. What are they trying to achieve with using a tool like yours? Or try to gear your product towards helping them achieve that goal that they need to achieve, right? So that you're helping them. So then they become the champion all across the organization, shouting out for this technology or for this solution. It makes it much easier instead of corporate or administration going and saying, use this, when your people are coming and saying, I want this. I think that's really important.
Does that work on the patient level too, or
It
mostly
does.
on the physician level?
It does. I mean, I always think, like, if you think of a digital tool, it's really great looking at the provider, but the patient needs to know how to use it and should be using it. So if you're going to do training, you're not only looking at the provider, you need to train the patient as well. And there is training that you need to do on both ends. Because if it doesn't bring that data in, and if it doesn't make a difference into the provider, you can give it to the patient. They're not using it. It's not of any use to us. So we wouldn't spend the money to do something like that unless there is buy-in and connection with the patient.
So that sounds like you have maybe an engagement metric that's part of an evidence package. Is that the right way to think about it?
You know, something we did, a capability we developed a few years ago to get to the end user. We were really frustrated with doing these transitions in care work. We did these really, elegant designs of transitioning people from the hospital to home, and got right down to the end of where you're supposed to take your medication, you're supposed to have an intervention at home, and nothing happened. I mean, it all was great right up until the moment somebody was supposed to take the pill. And we couldn't understand what this was. I mean, we just couldn't figure it out. And so we designed our version of video ethnography. I mean, I have anthropologists who work for me. And these anthropologists went around and followed, at one point we did 600 studies of people, in this transition, from all the way from in the hospital room, following them with a little video camera back in the day, a small little handheld camera back in the day, compiled them. Sociologists did calculations on what were the critical areas, and we found out kind of what happened. And it really was that lack of education, that lack of knowledge, that lack of knowing what the importance was on our side to them to get them to do that intervention at the last moment. So I mean, we had to get that kind of sophisticated, and it wasn't going to come from having focus groups, and it wasn't going to come from, my mom told me, or my brother, or Joe, or somebody. It was like you had to have a disciplined approach. And anthropologists, we thought, these people do this for a living. They're really good at it. They quantify it. They can measure statistical differences between interventions. And instead of having 2 or 3 or 4 things that we found has the intractable reasons for poor transitions, we found 15 or 16 causes.
I have a story on that one too. So sometimes you get these really great apps and tools that come on smartphones, and we have Arizona, in our Arizona service area. It's Sun City, majority retired Medicare population over 65, right? And so some of these people have a flip phone. They don't even have a smartphone, right? So there's all these great technologies that do it, but it doesn't affect the technology they have. And some of these people have a smartphone, but they're terrified of using data or their plan, because they think if they use the app, they're going to have to spend more money to buy more data, there's this fear. So when you're looking at technology and then looking at the populations that have to use it, I think things that we think are really simple and should be so obvious is not so obvious for the population. And if the goal is to engage your patient, these are the things that you have to really think about and look at that in more depth.
I will say there's 2 main categories of performance we look at with either prospective partners or current partners. The first is engagement. So whoever your user is, whether it's the doctor, the patient, or just your average kind of member or consumer, they're not necessarily patients, right? They're just members like you and me. And we look at that. So anything you can show early on, it's not just the clinical or cost outcomes, it's engagement and participation. So how many of your target users are actually signing up? So you can say, oh, we had 50, but maybe you reached out to 1 million to get that 50. That's important for us to know, right? Puts things into context for us. So your hit rate, your engagement, your penetration is really important. And then secondly, we look at outcomes. Both are very, very important because the provider and payer, think about the work that comes in after contracting. So contracting is a few months. By the way, add a few months to a year to everything you're doing. Contracting takes a few months. And then you have to work with sales, marketing, digital, direct email marketing, outreach to actually find those users and patients to come join your program. That's half the battle because a lot of partnerships, no one ends up using the product and you can't even assess the outcomes, right? So that's a huge piece of it. And then after that, you're waiting. You're seeing how many people enroll, how long they stay, so the retention of their participation, to then be able to look at data, claims data, cost data, 1 to 3 years out at minimum. So for a lot of our programs, like all of that into account and kind of plan accordingly because we're looking at both engagement to assess how much work it takes for us to launch a program, as well as outcomes. Was it worth doing all that work to launch that program?
Because then it changes, right? Then all of a sudden new technology comes in, new metrics come in, and then you just start all over again.
So we could talk about this stuff for hours, but I know people have homes and families and things. So we want to save some time for questions from the audience. I think someone has a microphone, but even if they don't, just raise your hand and speak really loudly.
So if you have a product that actually solves several problems, is it best to just come to you with one and then have you say, oh, but I have these other problems, maybe it would be better for this, and let you make that determination and just present you with one?
So did everybody hear the question, by the way? Lots of nods? No? Okay, so the question is, if you have a product that solves many problems, should you focus on one and present these folks with just one at a time, or should you sort of broad brush it?
I can start. We prefer that when you come to us that you present your full suite of capabilities because we're looking for thought partners. We're not just looking for vendors. And I think what's troubling sometimes is people will come to us with one specific solution or one aspect of their solution. Down the line, we realized they had analytic capabilities or something really interesting that would support the work that we're doing in innovation. And if you are a partner that has so many dimensions and capabilities, you are a stronger partner to us. And so actually understanding your full suite of capabilities, I think, is important for us to assess where you fit in and what the long-term potential is. I would share everything that you can do. And then let the organization guide you to what they need and where you can work together. And it might be different for every organization.
I'd agree with that. It's to your benefit to have done some research and knowledge about the problems that I'm having. I mean, issues that I'm struggling with that I'm having trouble solving internally, to know that. And if you can say, you've got these 5 things and I can take care of, 4 of them.
How would you find that?
Well, a lot of times it's contacts inside the organization. A lot of times, for organizations that are the size of ours, they're pretty much the common problems. I mean, pre-diabetes hits all 3 of these organizations, I can tell you right now.
The whole country.
Yeah.
The whole world, actually.
Compliance issues hit all 3 of them. It's just these are pan-organizational, issues. But if you know that, and you can walk in and say, I can't fix everything, but I can fix these 3, now you're listening. Now I'm listening about all 3 of those instead of just one, which may.
I think this goes to value proposition, right? When you talk about value, it's not just, maybe it's one product, but you have other metrics or pieces of evidence that you're sharing with us that make your product more unique and powerful. So I think it's designing your value proposition and selling it in a very holistic manner and not just, here's a DPP program, because we get a lot of those.
But I think you need to be careful about if you have 5 things and you do one really well and 4 so-so, you present everything, and let's say that the provider wants the so-so product, and you end up not being able to meet you can't deliver. You've lost that in you had with the company. So I would say if you have a lot of those things, it's good to present it, but make sure that you have what you need to back up to do that in the company.
One common theme I'm hearing is that there are so many innovations out there, you can only afford to focus in on so many at a time, and choose your battles carefully. And what you assess has to be aligned with your current strategic imperatives. You mentioned that issues right now are diabetes, regulation. I'm sure there are more. What are the key, most burning pain points in each of your minds you'd like to
So the question for the audience, I'm going to grossly paraphrase, but what are the key, burning areas where you want outside innovation to solve these problems?
You want me to start? So behavioral health, patient engagement, continuum of care, post-acute care, because we're in bundles in 23 of our hospitals, and how you could do the pre-acute and post-acute coordination. Those are things that we're really struggling. And if you want to know what our objectives are, we have a Horizon 2020 plan, which says what we want to be in 2020. And all of these things are in there. And so if you can support that, we have an accelerated Horizon 2020 plan right now. And anything that helps us to get to that is going to be important to us. But those are definitely a focus.
We probably all have very similar 2020 plans. But on the wellness and prevention side, I can speak for that since that is my focus area. So obviously, Humana is a very big company, and we mostly serve Medicare and Medicaid and commercial. However, besides those main things that you've already heard, on the wellness and prevention side, we're looking at weight loss, nutrition, stress and anxiety management, mindfulness, all kinds of emotional well-being areas. We're looking at caregiving and supporting caregivers. 1 out of 4 members of ours are caregivers. That's a crazy statistic, actually, if you didn't know that. And financial well-being, because that is a main cause of stress and poor health. So we're really trying to get to the root causes of things and addressing those before they become a problem. And I think that's really stretching that really broad spectrum we already have. But we're on this side. How do we prevent and support your lifestyle at home, your kind of outside of the hospital concerns? As much as we can tackle there, we're very interested.
So these are exactly the same things that we struggle with. We have a growth of and I'm very happy that we have the ACA. It's a great law. It's helped millions of Americans. The reality for us has been a growth in Medicaid and Medi-Cal, which is unprecedented. It's, we're a vertically integrated, prepaid system. Our clinics look the same, no matter who walks in the door. Have a different model for different populations. We have to move all of those different populations in. So, elderly with chronic illnesses who are poor, Medi-Cal populations, Medicaid populations. So very different challenges. We've always taken care of those populations, and we enjoy that. That's part of our heritage. But at this kind of scale, we haven't seen this kind of growth in a long time. So figuring out how to get the kinds of services those individuals need is something we're on a steep learning curve for that right now.
Just want to add one thing to that. So we are a faith-based hospital system, right? So caring for the poor is in our mission statement. And health equity is very important to us. But I was talking to a colleague of mine in Providence Health System, and he was saying, if we can provide our care at Medicaid or Medi-Cal reimbursement rates, then we're in a good position, because it's more and more your commercial payer mix is going down and Medicare is going down, but if we could do it that way. So what we're trying to do is do low cost but high quality care that's less costly. So does that mean that we go from structured buildings to telehealth or other options of care delivery? We have to look at all of that, I think, because that's the future.
So I'm not a member of the council. I don't know what their volume is that they push through a year. Usually it's products which are at maturity, which we're thinking about, purchasing. Think artificial hips, or devices that would go in somebody's body, or different kinds of equipment. Think of maybe wireless pumps, for the ICU, those sorts of things, where we try and break stuff, in the product. Our job, our providers, our care teams are counting on us putting stuff out there that we've pretty much put through the ringer. We drop it on the floor, we stop up and down on it. We try and get it to fail. or know where it's going to fail before we put it out. I'm not sure of the volume that they go through every year. A lot. It's an active group.
So Omada, when did they go through product council?
Amada, eventually did touch that. As it went through, but it started out as a pilot. It started out as one of those, DPP projects that came through, and we wanted to try it as some of the early efforts on telehealth. Our proportion of care that's given by telehealth is, it hasn't quite gotten to parity with face-to-face visits, but you can see a time in the not too distant future where it's going to have parity and probably even overtake. So Omada was a very sophisticated organization where we could learn not only how to take care of individuals at risk for prediabetes or with prediabetes, but also learn how to iterate with companies who wanted to be innovative. So that was learning on both sides. We were looking at them as much as they were looking at us.
So for us, we use Lucro right now to take a look at all of these inputs of requests. So before coming here, I wrote to our VP of Pop Health, and I said, how do you look at these new companies? Because we have a technology stack that we're trying to fill in. And she said she deletes about 10 to 20 requests per week that comes in her way, because what she's trying to do is build the infrastructure. We're still trying to sort of build the foundation before we can do all the fancy stuff. And so so what we didn't want to do was lose some of these things, which will come down the road. So when you request something, then ask you to go into Lucro, set up an account, and say who you are and what you're doing. And then we have our people on Lucro too, and we have these buckets that we're looking at. And if you fall into one of those buckets, then the people will go in and look at what was presented today. So we're trying to move into a more organized way of looking at requests so that we don't lose things along the way.
And how do you spell Lucro?
Lucro.
Can I just throw out an area that's a big pain point for us that hasn't been touched on here? Knowledge management is a huge deal for us. So whenever we update a guideline or a pathway, which gets right into how this is super nerdy stuff. So when we do that stuff, so we'll go find the 1,000 or 10,000 articles that have been written about that. I mean, and it's literally those kind of numbers. Somebody will hand shuffle through those and figure out which are the 300 that are important. They get read and scored by methodologists. Those are tabulated and put into tables where people can actually look at the evidence in a tabulated manner and actually present that now to clinical teams or guidelines teams who can start arguing over, how are we going to change treatment for coronary artery disease or things like that. So I mean, we're kind of looking out there going, this is like super nerdy stuff. I mean, this is not a big bang that hits consumers right there on their iPhone, but it's like foundational for what we do. And it is not very automated, or not automated well. I mean, the people who've come to us on this were like, no, it's like when we compare what our methodologists do to what you do, you only hit 20%, of the articles that should have been screened. I mean, or something like that. So, I always kind of looked at it going, that actually, has worth. In organizations like mine and like the others who are setting up here. And I just don't see anybody spending a lot of time on that. I think they just like seeded the data up to date. Well, there's up to date, so we'll just back off and let them have it instead of pushing forward into that. But knowledge management has worth.
See that guy in the gray shirt back there? His name is Borna. Go talk to him. His company's name is Agile Diagnostics. It's awesome. Okay, so we're way over right now, so thanks everybody for your patience. I want to ask one final, leave it behind for all three of you. Top tip for digital health companies and solutions that are trying to, again, build trust with you. You only have one answer. What is it?
I'm thinking. I'm going to think before I speak.
Your evidence has got to be all lined up. It's got to be rock solid. it's got to be just rock solid because I'll find a hole in it.
Yeah, no, I will say, I mean, you're solving to the healthcare industry, which is a very technical, scientific, meaningful field. We're trying to save lives or improve lives, right? So just know that the stakeholders who are in industry have huge mission and responsibility. And so whatever you come with, whether you have healthcare background or don't have healthcare background, show that you've done your research, show that you care, and be very targeted in your outreach. So we get a lot of emails every day. And my title will say wellness and prevention, and I'll get a med device early stage company contacting me about a trial. We don't do that. That's really risky. This is not the right environment. So basic things, sort that out, and then go to the right contacts or ask. I mean, it's totally okay to ask. So if you come and reach out to us and say, who is the best person to talk to about this, or do you guys work with these types of companies, we'll tell you. But don't assume, and definitely have done some homework and come to us with a meaningful proposition, and you're guaranteed to get a very good conversation and get a lot of feedback, if anything.
I would say that some of the problems that we might be trying to solve may be many, many steps below what you actually think we are solving. So for example, we might want to know who the PCP of our patient is when they come into the ED. And we don't know that, right? We would want to improve the finding a doctor experience for our patients. We'd want to make sure that when they're sitting to get registered, they want to do it. These basic things that are going to improve the patient satisfaction, the physician satisfaction, all of those things that have needs or repercussions for hospital systems. So sometimes you might have the best technology, but look at the use case that's really foundational and basic, because that's what we're trying to solve right now. I started off by saying healthcare is where innovation might be coming to sort of linger and die, and I want us to change that, and Dignity Health is trying to do that, but you have to first build that foundation. So just look at it there, and I think you're going to have a lot of people wanting to talk to you. And then once you're in, we can build the house, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much tonight for your candor and good intent. And thanks everybody else for coming and for your time and attention.